Well, good morning, dear friends. I'm so glad you can join me again for this exciting story. The angels appeared to the shepherds on the field just outside Bethlehem, and they told them that something very special had happened in Bethlehem. And the shepherds spoke to one another, and they said, let's go over to Bethlehem and see whether these things are true. And that's the invitation that we have, to go to Bethlehem and to see whether things are true. Now, the story of the Christmas, the story that we like is found in Luke's Gospel, chapter 2. And Luke, he tells us that he wrote the Gospel of Luke because he wanted to put the things in a certain systematic order, and he wanted to see which things are true and not. So he did a lot of research in the story of Jesus, and he went to speak to the eyewitnesses, people who had experienced what had happened during the lifetime of Jesus. Because as he was living, I suppose that was shortly after the death and resurrection of Jesus, while he was living, there's quite a lot of stories going around about Jesus. People exaggerated, and the stories were changed a little bit and so on. So he decided he was going to go and speak to the eyewitnesses and write these things down so that they would have an accurate account of the life and times of Jesus. So one of the things what he did, he went and looked for Mary, and he spent quite a considerable time with Mary to find out about how Jesus was born. And so the Gospel of Luke, the story of Christmas, according to Luke, is actually Mary's version of it. And there is a legend, I suppose, where the city of Ephesus is, just ruins today in Turkey, but just outside of the city on a hill there are two graves, and they say one grave is Luke's grave and the other grave is Mary's grave. So he got this, which he's telling us, from Mary. And Luke chapter 2, it begins that it was in the time when Augustus was the Caesar in Rome, and Quirinius was the governor in Syria, that a decree went out that all the world had to be counted. It was the first census probably that was going to be taken, and that everybody had to go to the father's house. Well, that meant for Joseph, he had to go to Bethlehem. And suddenly the name of this city, of this village, of this place is once more, it comes into our focus. And we heard the first time about Bethlehem right back at the beginning of the Bible, in the first book of Moses, in the book of Genesis, when we hear that Rachel didn't quite make it to Bethlehem, that she died on the way as she was giving birth to Benjamin. And I tried to explain, that if we see Bethlehem not just as a geographical place, but also as an attitude, as a spirit, as an ethos that is over us. And we saw that this was often very contradictory to the ethos and the attitude of Benjamin. And so we had these two tribes, Judah and Benjamin, that were at loggerheads with one another. And we see this especially in the lives of the King Saul, who was a Benjaminite, and King David, who came from Judah. Now, Joseph has to go back to Bethlehem. In the meanwhile, the kingdom has gone. There is a nation of Israel. The king who's ruling over Israel is a vassal of Rome, and he himself is an Edomite. He's a descendant of Esau, the brother of Jacob. The people despise him. Herod the king, he tries to appease the Jews by doing a lot of building. He's modernized the temple. He's made it actually into one of the seven wonders of the world. it was well worth going to Jerusalem to visit, and he hoped that Jerusalem would become the religious center of the world. And he was doing a lot of building, he was doing a lot of modernizing. The only problem was, or one of the problems was, that Jerusalem didn't have a very good water supply. There's only one spring of water from the Siloam, which we also know from the New Testament. So he diverted the water, the springs of Bethlehem, to go to Jerusalem. And that was an exploitation of Bethlehem, and the people were not very happy. They wouldn't come out with any direct criticism, but there would be a lot of muttering against Herod because he did this. Jerusalem, Bethlehem was being exploited. And it was to this place that Joseph and Mary came. They probably came by foot. On the Christmas cards we see Mary on a donkey. I don't know whether that's true or not, but they came the very long way. And to get to Bethlehem from Nazareth in the north, they would have to walk. I suppose they walked along the side of the River Jordan until they got to the Jerusalem area. They would go through Jerusalem, this now modern city, and they would leave Jerusalem, and Jerusalem in the back. So as I've heard, I've never been there, but then you go downhill and then you have to go back uphill to get to Bethlehem. Jerusalem behind you, you get to Bethlehem, and Jerusalem is outside, and the next thing to Bethlehem is then the Judean desert. It's in between. It's an in-between place, and it's here in Bethlehem that Jesus was going to be born. We'd forgotten about Bethlehem. We know that David came from Bethlehem, and we saw the spirit of Bethlehem in his early life anyway, and then we reminded, or God promises in the book of Micah that the Messiah is going to come from Bethlehem, but then we forget it again. And you see, God is moving this couple from the north to the south, and he can move the whole world just to fulfill one or two things that he wants to see fulfilled. So they come this very long way from Nazareth to Bethlehem, because Bethlehem is so special, and it's in Bethlehem that the Messiah is going to be born. Does it really matter? We would ask, well, maybe not, except that God has said it. And what God has said about things that's going to happen, what God said about your life will happen. What God has said about your family will happen. You see, his words don't fall without power. He says, the word that comes out of my mouth will not return to me void, but it will accomplish that what I've sent it to do. So, dear friend, what I want to tell you today, what we learn from the story of Bethlehem, is that God is not finished with you. Perhaps everybody's forgotten you. Perhaps you've forgotten God. Perhaps you've forgotten things that he's said to you in the past, but God has not forgotten. And God will is working to complete that which he has promised. So I just want to give you hope. You know, God is not finished with you as a person. He's not finished with your family. He's not finished with your church. He's not finished with the nation. He's not finished with this world. God is still working, despite it looks like it's the complete opposite, and there's so many difficult situations going on right now. But God has not forgotten anything, and God will win in the end. And I'm just so happy about that. And I want to wish you a very good day, and we'll see you tomorrow when I hope we will arrive at Bethlehem. God bless you. Bye-bye.